listening to Reset Race. You now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. What? Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Back on the grill again. We grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOLPH need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake. Lineage go back to US Southern plantations. Lineage, Jim Crow and mass incarceration. Redlining lynchings. We are old from this nation. You're not about justice if you ain't for reparations. MG the wise one. Cousin mother intellectual. Samantha bringing fire. Anti-black we pressing you. No permanent friends and no permanent enemies. The backbone of the country to win. You need our energy. You gon' see. Listening to Reset Race. You now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Back on the grill again. We grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOLPH need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake.
Welcome to Reset Race, where we talk about politics, race, and how those things intersect and how those things affect those of us who are Negro, African American, descendants of slaves, here in the United States, US Freedmen, which is our preferred term, and it is what it is. So we have a guest here today. Our friend Edie is here, and she's gonna introduce herself first, and then we'll go around the table with the rest of the crew. Edie.
Hey everybody at Reset Race. Thank you for having me back. I feel so honored to be asked every time. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming, Edie. All right, so we go around the horn. Sam.
Alrighty, so I am Sam, aka the Khalessi, and y'all know I am not. So contrary to popular belief, I effing hate talking about Breonna Greyjoy. She turns my stomach. She hurts my soul and my spirit. And she makes me pray to my ancestors that they visit her in her sleep. So I hope everybody enjoys today's BS, because Breonna Greyjoy, you, as I keep saying, and this is not a hyperbole, you are an enemy of poor Black people. All right, go ahead, Josiah. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the folks. Killmonger.
All hail King Killmonger. I'm here. It is I, Josiah. I got some things to say. I feel away. And let's get to it.
I thought you were gonna give us a rhyme. All right. Mud, talk to us, man.
Yeah, they call me Mud. You can find me on all my social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Clubhouse @of Lineage. I got something special for the next Bitter Dose TV. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into the show.
All right, cool. Thank you, everybody. I've been pushing the Adolph Reed video out, the one where he admits that right wingers are pushing money into the left.
Dick, nigga. Fuck out of here, nigga. You was fake in the hood, nigga. Like that ass, nigga.
I think the career of Adolph Reed is over, and it's not because people give a fuck about his bullshit with the COVID stuff. I think he has finally split his own base because he let the cat out the bag. He exposed that some of his friends are actually working with Nazis. And we're not supposed to notice this left-right alliance that has been forming with these socialists. So his audience is pretty upset.
It's not so much Trump as that really shadowy, ugly underworld of ultra right wingers. I mean, neo-Nazis are, I don't even know what neo means in this case, right? But who ironically and unfortunately understand organizing, right? Much better than the posturing leftists do. So like they've got these various news services, and then there's shit like at the high end, Julius Krein, who has this new magazine called American Affairs. It's funny because he contacted me.
Oh, right, yeah.
Late in the spring about doing a book review. He was going to pay me $2,000 to do a book review. And being the person I am in my history, when I saw the name, I just assumed he was at least my age, was a Jewish neocon who was out someplace in Brooklyn with like a past that touched Partisan Review and and I mean that shit. And then I found out that he's the other kind of Julius Krein. He's from South Dakota. He's 18 years old.
Right.
And is a Nazi, basically. He went to Harvard and was a Trumper until he wasn't. And this magazine is extremely well funded by Mellon or Scape or somebody like that. And they've been fishing, right? Because they've contacted several of my friends. And they got Angela Nagel, but she'd gotten got already anyway. Yeah. But they were trying to publish people with reputations for being iconoclasts on the left, and it's clearly like it's clearly a political operation that's directed towards trying to stir up shit and discord, right among leftists.
So this is Adolph Reed, the man who is always diverting discussions about race, acknowledging that there's a well-oiled white supremacist political machine out there. And at the same time, he is acknowledging that they're reaching out to a lot of his friends and himself. This is causing a lot of controversy on that side, or in these little groups, because a lot of these leftists are white supremacists. They have no problem with linking up with white supremacists on the other side, as long as they could try to accomplish their goals. A lot of these academics and a lot of these spokespeople for this group, they're out here grifting. They have no problem taking money from Nazis. And because this is getting exposed by Adolph Reed, he kind of got himself in some shit.
Brianna Joy Gray, she has run into an issue, regardless of what we have pointed out about her politics. Suddenly she's in hot water because she said something out of pocket. It's considered out of pocket. Well, you guys will decide how you feel about it to a Jewish Antifa person. So let's see how it goes. And we're going to start off with her defense of what she said, defense of what she said on the Hill. So we'll start from there. Sam, take it from there.
And I want to take this moment to say I find it hilarious that the Hill hired Kim Iverson, who is a whole anti-Black racist. Like, I know that she like feigned the sickness to say that she was for, like pretend that she was okay with reparations after talking to Marianne. But I remember running across this chick's show a couple years ago. She is an anti-Black racist, and she plays the I'm half Asian card. Yeah, fuck her. So we'll have to dig those old videos up someday and go for her and go through her, because she a whole problem too.
Yeah, I mean that's how you get hired. You're willing to shit on Black people. Great, you never go hungry. There's always somebody willing to pay you for that.
Mhm. All right, let's rock. We're not gonna play all of this. It's just gonna be a little bit. Okay, Khalessi, come on. I need this play button.
Author and leftist Twitter personality Talia Lavin joined Brianna Joy Gray's Bad Faith podcast this week in a conversation that went awry when the topic turned to de-radicalization and coalition building with the far right. Here's some video of that.
Listen, like I don't think that I'm going to be able to convince you. I think if you want to like hold hands with a Nazi and kiss them gently on the cheek, that's fine. I just don't think that's going to work out well for you.
Do you think that what I'm arguing for is that I Brianna Joy Gray, who was sitting before you as a Black woman, wants to hold hands with Nazis and kiss them in the street? I'm not trying to debate you at all here. I'm trying to explore what I think are some tensions that I too am wrestling with. And I would hope that since we're both members of this group, of these groups that certainly see no benefit in appeasing Nazis, that we can have a conversation that doesn't presume that where we're coming from is because of some natural sympathy with these groups, as opposed to genuinely trying to strategize about how to fix this problem that we very much agree on, which is that America is being increasingly radicalized in these extremist ways.
I feel like I've stated my position repeatedly, and then I don't quite know how to react to respond other than like, no, I really believe what I believe. Everything we can do to mitigate those feelings in such large masses of the population, like, that's great. I think there are many constructive things you can do to fight Nazism that don't involve brass knuckling up and like just flattening the nose of a Proud Boy. But like, I think you have to be willing to brass knuckle up and flatten the nose of a Proud Boy too.
Well, after the podcast was posted, Talia took to Twitter and posted private DMs between her and Brianna, captioning it, quote, "an absolute mess." Glenn Greenwald joined the fray, tweeting out, "Amazing. Lavin feels comfortable accusing Gray of wanting to kiss Nazis, literally, due to Bree's crime of believing in the best left-wing tradition that root causes should be understood instead of just calling people bad names." Well, we've invited Lavin to join Rising at a future time to discuss, but right now we have the host of Bad Faith podcast and former national spokesperson for the Bernie Sanders campaign, Brianna Joy Gray, here to give her side of the story. Brianna, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So how do you feel about being called a Nazi and all these other things? I mean, what is your take on all of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately very unfortunate. I'm obviously very humbled and grateful that so many interesting guests are willing to come on Bad Faith podcast and engage in good faith conversation with me there. I was really interested in talking to Talia because few people have had as much close proximity with people that are so radicalized and far right and extremist as she has. Her book and her project has been to infiltrate right-wing spaces online, including by making a dating profile on white.net and interacting with men on there for a year and a half. So my first question to her, it actually wasn't about deprogramming at all. I simply asked her as a leftist what that experience did to inform her confidence or pessimism about building broad coalitions, not with Nazis, of course, but how did it broadly inform her thoughts and feelings about how to coalition build among a broad multiracial coalition? And she immediately pivoted the conversation to deprogramming. The way to get out of this mess and the way to resolve the political balkanization and the rise of right-wing extremism is going to require a deprogramming that is not going to, it's going to require a broader deprogramming that accesses the core of what's driving people into these communities at higher and higher rates, right? And that it's not necessarily going to be about saying you're racist and you're bad, even if that's 100% true, but that it's going to be about figuring out what compels an individual to find more solace in white supremacy than another kind of community. And so I wonder what your thoughts are on that as a leftist. Is there an incompatibility with wanting to have a broad multiracial coalition and a kind of insistence? I mean, you're dealing with the a really narrow extreme part of the country. So I don't want to say that every conservative or every Trump voter is implicated in this conversation. But, you know, do you ever feel like there's a tension between kind of the need to coalition build and a perception of a certain segment of society as kind of untouchable?
I don't feel that tension.
Presumably because she's gotten a lot of questions about that before, and it became very defensive almost immediately. And I was curious about that, primarily because so often these conversations go off the rails because one party or the other accuses each other of anti-Semitism, of being a Nazi sympathizer, exactly the way it happened here. And I hoped that because I'm a Black American who obviously benefits not at all from the rise of Nazis, and that I argued is equally yoked insofar as my community and hers have a lot to lose from the rise of radical extremism, but we might be able to have a reasonable conversation that didn't default into this kind of identity essentialism. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think in her behavior, she ended up making the worst possible case you could for the argument she was making. And we're not talking behind her back. She's welcome, and I hope she does come here and discuss this with us. But she is essentially in the camp saying that it is fine to deny certain rights, free speech protections to the far right, to the extreme right, people engaged in far right activity. And I always say, well, if you're going to have that standard, you know, backtrack from the old ACLU standard that the Nazis should be able to march through Skokie, then you have to have a very clear definition of who actually is a Nazi and which rights we're taking away. At the very, like, I wouldn't support this, but this would be a way you'd have to go about doing it. And instead, she's expanding the definition of who is a Nazi to include, like, you, and saying the rights that should be taken away include, like, they should be met with explicit violence. So I feel like she is undermining any plausible case you could make for she's not strongmanning the Antifa position, is she?
Yeah, the Skokie example is important because the argument that ACLU is making there is not that Nazis are good and should be defended, or that there is any value necessarily to their speech, but part of the principle is that it is so difficult to discern whose speech should and should not be abridged, right? Whose rights should and shouldn't be taken away, and who's going to be the arbiter of that. And it's particularly concerning that Talia showed a lack of humility in that regard because, and I don't bring this up because I have any interest in, you know, digging in on this point or highlighting a mistake. A lot of people make mistakes, but she is kind of known for having been let go from the New Yorker as a fact checker because she misidentified an ICE officer as having a white supremacist tattoo that in fact was not a white supremacist tattoo. You know, ending up targeting that person for what ultimately ended up being unjustified hate and attack, right? So if you have already made a mistake like that in your personal life as a fact checker at a prestigious institution, one might think you would have a little humility before going around saying that folks need to be deplatformed, et cetera. And in fact, in the context of our conversation, she admitted that deplatforming would ultimately disproportionately affect the left. She completely conceded that point. It will hurt the left more than the right. And yet she decided that that was okay and a fine consequence, I guess, if it met the ultimate ends. And as someone who is only able to support herself, frankly, after having been marginalized by the mainstream news media for having progressive values, by having an independent platform and a site like Patreon, I think it's really concerning to see her willingness to take such draconian action without even giving some thought into what the kind of metrics would be for that kind of attack on free speech.
Hello and welcome to another TLDR EU video. Hate speech is sadly rife on the internet, from comments that skate the line to unquestionably offensive remarks. One country that's attempted to do something material about it has been Germany. Since the 1st of October 2017, the Network Enforcement Act, known as NetzDG, has beefed up protections and forced platforms to take content down quickly. The issue with this is that some believe that NetzDG doesn't go far enough, and others think it goes too far altogether. So in this video, we'll take a dive into Germany's hate speech law, and what the future could hold for the internet in Germany and around Europe. If you want us to be able to report on whatever we want without censorship or fear of demonetization, then be sure to back us on Patreon. Doing so not only gets you great perks such as behind the scenes posts, early access to videos and live events, but it also helps support our channel and our content. To find out more and support TLDR, click the link in the description. First things first then, what actually is the Network Enforcement Act? Well, in the words of the government department responsible for it, NETS-DG aims to fight hate crime, criminally punishable fake news, and other unlawful content on social networks more effectively. This includes insult, malicious gossip, defamation, public incitement to crime, incitement to hatred, disseminating portrayals of violence, and threatening commission of a felony. In practice, a number of new requirements were established. Platforms were required to offer an easily recognizable, quickly accessible, and permanently available procedure for reporting content, to take down content as quickly as possible. Manifestly unlawful content, the content that's obviously harmful or illegal, must, under German law, be taken down within 24 hours. All other criminal content must be blocked within 7 days. Twice a year, platforms are also obligated to publish publicly available reports on their compliance. But the main deterrent of these systems are the fines. Failure to deal with complaints within the 24-hour or 7-day time frame, or a failure to set up a system at all, can result in fines of up to 5 million euros against the person responsible for the complaints management system, and up to 50 million euros against the company itself. And Germany is prepared to use this power. Back in August of 2019, the German Federal Office of Justice fined Facebook Ireland Limited, Facebook's EU base, 2 million euros for violating reporting obligations. However, the wider issue is invariably whether NETS-DG has struck the right balance between free speech and privacy on one hand, and law enforcement and national security on the other. As recently as June this year, other countries' attempts at hate speech regulation have come under judicial and constitutional scrutiny. In May, and in the first piece of legislation not linked to the pandemic since lockdowns began, France finally adopted a law on hate speech, largely echoing that of Germany. Platforms such as Google, Twitter, and Facebook would now have 24 hours to remove content flagged as hateful, and just 1 hour to remove content flagged as terrorist propaganda. The fines were, however, significantly reduced from the German system, maxing out at just 1.25 million euros. The criticism of this new scheme was rife, and nothing new either. All the way back in November, the European Commission wrote to the French government to voice their concerns, asking that the government wait for a common EU standard to be enacted, and claiming that the new French law may not actually comply with EU laws. That's because the EU is currently negotiating and drafting up the aforementioned common EU standard, known as the Digital Services Act. This act is designed to set a common benchmark and Europe-wide policy for moderating and dealing with illegal and hateful content, and is expected early next year. We will, of course, cover that in the new year if any interesting developments arise out of it. Anyway, within a matter of months, the law was hauled before France's Constitutional Council, after some raised concerns over how platforms were actually meant to determine what was unlawful. Critics argued that the law, as it was, encouraged platform providers to remove flagged content, whether or not it actually infringed on any laws, in effect, over censorship. Citing Article 34 of the French Constitution, the court balanced the right of the government to restrict freedom of expression and communication that violates public order and rights of third parties against the general freedom of expression and communication, concluding that freedom of expression is all the more valuable because its exercise is a condition of democracy. Therefore, Parliament has brought to freedom of expression and communication an infringement that is not appropriate, necessary, or proportionate to the purpose pursued, and therefore the law was deemed unconstitutional. In spite of all these difficulties in France, Germany is clearly not backing down. Instead, it's actually going even further. A matter of days after the court in France concluded that the French version was unconstitutional, Germany passed amendments and reforms that would require platform providers to report certain types of criminal content to the Federal Crime Police Office, adding to the already fervent criticisms of the law. Now the concern is that social media giants are being co-opted to help the state build massive databases on citizens without robust legal justification. For civil liberty and privacy campaigners, the move is yet another step in the wrong direction, with some going as far as to state that the move violates rule of law guarantees in the German constitution, and that forcing platforms to reveal their users' true identities to the authorities without a court mandate or proper individual judicial review would set a very, very dangerous precedent. In 2018, NetzDG, as it was back then, without any of these new proposals, was already highly criticised. Human Rights Watch, an international non-governmental organisation advocating for, you guessed it, human rights, called out the law directly. The Germany director of the Human Rights Watch stressed that governments and the public have valid concerns about the proliferation of illegal or abusive content online, but the new German law is fundamentally flawed. It's vague, overbroad, and turns private companies into overzealous censors to avoid steep fines, leaving users with no judicial oversight or right to appeal. In their eyes, this opens the path for far more aggressive legislation by other countries, using the already flawed German model as a basis. This new reform only adding to the laws may seem to have come out of nowhere, but actually it's anything but. The impetus of the reform being the 2019 murder of local German politician Walter Lübcke by a neo-Nazi. A murder preceded by a number of targeted threats and hate speech, as Lübcke had become the face of Germany's refugee policy, a highly controversial policy, which, if you want, we can cover in another video. Just let us know in the comments below. Anyway, the reforms to force police notifications aren't even the end. Wider reform is ongoing, with objections ranging from strengthening users' rights and making reporting channels more friendly, to simplifying the appeals process and the significance of transparency reports. A spokesperson on legal affairs for the Social Democrats, the junior coalition party in Germany, stressed the importance of the move. We have to do more to prevent hate and slander from spreading online. No one's legitimately questioning the need for the protections and the need to take down hateful content, the issue being achieving some semblance of balance. As we said near the top of the video, it's about achieving the right balance between free speech and privacy on one hand, and law enforcement and national security on the other. Something highlighted by a German MP for the opposition Green Party when they said, "What we're debating here in Berlin has great relevance for all democracies, whether they're in Europe or elsewhere in the world. We're walking a tightrope, having to balance the fight against disinformation, incitement and slander on one side with the right to free speech on the other, which is of paramount importance in democracies. To come up with a law that's both balanced and effective is far from a trivial task." Germany already has some of the strictest laws on hate speech in the world. Inciting hatred against national, religious, ethnic or racial groups has already been outlawed for years and years. So is the use of racial slurs and displaying Nazi symbols. But for many German policymakers, Lübcke's murder highlighted that NetzDG doesn't go far enough, that more work needed to be done to protect people on and offline. But what do you think? Is NetzDG a template for other countries to use in order to regulate online content? Or does it impinge on key freedoms? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name listed at the end of the videos, then be sure to back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.
Yeah.
So we might take
what
money
I found
from Nazis.
most disturbing or interesting about.
Now I'm done. So we might actually take money from Nazis, and that would be a bad thing. Taking money away from Nazis and white supremacists. Go ahead.
But for me, I mean, a lot of that there was taking jabs at her personally, which was unnecessary, I think. But I don't, is what it is. But I think, we have drawn lines about what's free speech. Like they always say, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, right? When you start getting to the point where you're inciting violence, that's where you draw the line. When you start marginalizing other groups, that's where you draw the line, right? People act like free speech is absolute. It is not absolute. It has never been absolute, especially for us as Black people. It is still not absolute, right? And to act as if that's the case is, well, I understand why they're doing it, but to act as if that's the case is wild to me. Y'all go ahead.
Well, I want to jump in because the thing that was irking me the most is how they're conflating a few different issues. As far as like individuals getting into a fight with Nazis, that's completely different than our government taking their rights away. Deplatforming them from Patreon is completely different than our government taking their rights away.
That's true. It's a private organization. Yeah, I've been kicked off of a few platforms. I've been kicked off one platform several times. But we get that it's a private organization. They can do what they want to do. Yeah, it's a privately owned company. They can do what they want to do. Yeah.
Exactly. So I mean, they're not being honest in their framing of this whole issue, and I don't know. Like the ACLU has been around for a long time, and they have not figured out a way to resolve this issue of Nazis. So maybe we do need a different fucking approach to all of this. I'm not saying that we need to have the government come in and put on the brass knuckles. You know what I'm saying? But I think that this whole idea that we need to like play nice and allow these people to have equal space in mainstream society, I'm not with that. I'm sorry.
Not either. That's how we get murdered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this, look, it's a completely different thing than talking about your average Republican that doesn't give a fuck about Black people versus someone who is online and the way they entertain themselves is, daydreaming of genocide with a bunch of other, white supremacists.
You were a skinhead for how many years?
I was a neo-Nazi skinhead from 1987 until 1995, roughly from the time I was 14 years old until I was 21.
He says he and alleged Charleston shooter Dylan Roof might once have been kindred spirits.
Would you have applauded Dylan Roof?
I would have. I would have thought that this guy had the courage to speak for the rest of us and to do something.
We also have to understand that the violence that these people are doing, it's not just the talk. The talk is connected to violence, and we have to understand that. We have to be very clear about that. All right, go ahead.
So I want to start with a question. Why is this conversation happening? Why did the Rising pick this up? Since when does the Rising care to protect Black people from accusations of being Nazis or anti-Semitic?
It's because they're friends with Bree.
I don't remember Nick Cannon being given this like invitation to defend himself.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
I've yet to see the Louis Farrakhan episode where he gets to come on and defend himself against accusations of Nazism and free speech rights and all that.
Because Bree is a misinformation asset. That's why they're protecting her. But continue.
Yeah, Bree is the black face of white feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Like they put her out there to go ahead. Please go ahead.
This whole thing has been them shifting the Overton window, or at least attempting to, for them to try to make space on the left for white supremacists.
Preach.
There is no space on the left for Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
We are literally the opposite of that. The whole reason there is a left is so there won't be Nazis. That means there can't be Nazis on the left.
Mm-hmm. Especially an organization like Antifa.
So this is the thing. Sorry, I want to interject real quick, right? So hashtag ADOS got all this slack, right? Because I just want to ask this question, right?
Mm-hmm.
So hashtag ADOS got all this slack, right? We were called xenophobic. We were said that we hated immigrants, all this other stuff, and that people shouldn't build alliances with us, right? For reparations because we hate other groups. And we don't. These motherfuckers literally do. And it's in like they literature. And it's what they about. But you want to ally with them instead of allying with us, who are actually on the same side as you. Go ahead, Josiah.
No, we ain't. I am not on the same side as any Nazi collaborator.
No, I mean on the left. I'm talking about the left is supposed to be our home.
I got you.
So,
it's just like,
so you get what I'm saying? Instead of them coming to you, me, your grandmama, They rather go to some racists and not
the left. I don't believe that the left is her home. I don't believe she has a home politically. I think that her home is whoever is paying them checks. I think her home was with Bernie when Bernie had a job for her. Speaking of which, and speaking of people standing up for Black people on accusations of Nazism, where is Bernie Sanders on all of this? Because I remember where Breonna was when Bernie was being accused of racism. Scratch a lie, find a thief. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, this is MG from Reset Race. We're growing and so is our mission. Because of this, we're looking for volunteers to join our team. The skills we need most right now are researchers, video editors, and men and women to do voiceovers. If you're interested in helping out, go to actifypress.com/volunteer. Again, actifypress.com/volunteer. We hope to hear from you soon. Peace and justice from myself and the rest of the Reset Race crew.
Listening to Reset Race, you now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race, you're now tuned in to Reset Race. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them, put them back on the grill again. We grilling them, put them back on the grill again. We grilling them, back on the grill again. We grilling them, You're listening to Reset Race. ADOLPH need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake. Lineage go back to US Southern plantations. Lineage, Jim Crow and mass incarceration. Redlining lynchings, we are old from this nation. You're not about justice if you ain't for reparations. MG the wise one, cousin mother intellectual. Samantha bringing fire, anti-black, we pressing you. No permanent friends and no permanent enemies. The backbone of the country, the win, you need our energy. You gon' see? Listening to Reset Race, you now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race, you're now tuned in to Reset Race. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them, put them back on the grill again. We grilling them, put them back on the grill again. We grilling them, back on the grill again. We grilling them, You're listening to Reset Race. ADOLPH need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake.
Until you do right by me, everything you think about is gonna crumble.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.